And if you accept that the struggle against radical Islamic extremism is the transcendent challenge of our time, I have no doubt that my qualifications and my vision is far superior than to my competitors.
Hi, it's Josh Marshall from TPM Media. Today's Wednesday, March 19th, 2008. That was John McCain earlier this year explaining why he thinks Islamic extremism is the transcendent issue, foreign policy issue of our time. Now, today is the 5th anniversary of the Iraq War, and all three remaining presidential candidates are giving their pitch, their speech, describing their position on the Iraq War and why they would be the best commander-in-chief for the next 4 years. Yesterday, John McCain had a series of gaffes during his trip to the Middle East. He said a couple times that Iran was training al-Qaeda operatives that were operating inside Iraq.
We continue to be concerned about Iranian taking al-Qaeda into Iran, training them and sending them back. Common knowledge, and has been reported in the media, that that al-Qaeda is going back into Iran and receiving training and are coming back into Iraq from Iran.
He eventually had to be corrected by his supporter, Joe Lieberman. You can see right here.
I'm sorry, the Iranians are training extremists, not al-Qaeda.
Now, this obviously raises the question of just how knowledgeable John McCain is on foreign policy issues, and that's an especially big deal for him, since really his whole candidacy is premised on his mastery of national security and foreign policy issues. Now, I think this is actually only the tip of the iceberg, the tip of just a series of a long list of reasons why John McCain is actually unfit to be the commander-in-chief. In almost every discussion of foreign policy, not just today, but in previous years too, what stands out about McCain is his inability to see beyond the immediate issues of tactics, military tactics mainly, to any firm grasp of strategy or America's real vital interests. You see this in his free willingness to commit to a decades-long occupation of Iraq. It was also back in the 90s when he pushed for the introduction of ground troops into Kosovo during the Kosovo War. Recently, you can perhaps see this most clearly in his refusal to grapple with the political failure of the surge as opposed to its limited tactical successes.
The surge is working. The surge is working, sir. It is working. No, not apparently, it's working.
It is succeeding. The Democrats are the same ones who said it would fail. The Democrats are the same ones that after they said the surge wouldn't work and it worked, that politically that it wouldn't work, they are wrong. They are wrong. And we should start out this presidential debate by them admitting that they were wrong.
Now, the idea that fighting jihadists in Iraq or policing that country's religious and ethnic divides is the calling of our century is really belied by almost everything we see around the world today. Issues that McCain is unwilling, or I think really unable, to confront. And these are the issues that seem most likely to really be the challenges that we face throughout the rest of our lifetimes, and even probably the lifetimes of our children. Now, it's not easy to draw lessons from history, but one of the clearest lessons that there is that military power is almost always based on economic might. And the one, military power, seldom long outlives a country's economic power. And then what that tells us is that fiscal soundness, whether a country's budget is in order, whether it has chronic current accounts deficits and stuff like that, is a much bigger deal than any one weapon system, even any one small conflict like we have in Iraq. So let's step back and survey what we see around the world today. You have the huge sums of money that we're pouring into Iraq, the mountains of capital that's being built up in China, and in the background, the fossil fuel powered resurgence of Russia. Related to that, you have the weakness of the dollar, and not just in the rate of exchange with other currencies, but also the threat that the dollar is under as the reserve currency, the dominant currency around the world. And on top of that, the rising tide of anti-Americanism in almost every corner of the globe that's been, in some ways, was building up from the late 1990s, but especially with the Iraq War, has just been at a boil everywhere. Now, each of these issues is interrelated. They fit together in a variety of ways. They're all interlocked. Now, I've watched John McCain pretty closely for more than a decade, and I've watched this campaign really closely, and I've never seen anything that's given me any indication that he's really given any consideration to these issues, China, Russia, the economic and fiscal standing of the U.S., except as they sometimes come up as near-term military challenges. So is China building a blue water navy? Do we have some conflict with the Russians over some particular weapon system? Those kind of issues you hear from McCain. But the larger view, they're issues that never really seem to occur to him. Now, candidly, I don't think I've heard too much about these topics from the two other remaining candidates in the race, but neither of them has the myopia about Iraq that John McCain does. Or, for that matter, a willingness to spend money, I don't know how else to put it, like a drunken sailor on Iraq at the expense of everything else going on in the world. So everybody's very taken with the idea of John McCain as commander-in-chief. Hillary Clinton concedes the point that he has tremendous experience and he'd be a great one, and implicitly Barack Obama seems to as well. But if you look really closely at his positions on issues, he really doesn't seem to have any serious grasp of the real challenges facing this country. One of which is we have other rising powers that aren't a few people in the hills in Pakistan, but countries like China, like Russia, even the rise of the European Union. When McCain freely says he's willing to spend trillions more dollars on Iraq, he doesn't seem to have much of an appreciation for the fact that if the U.S. doesn't get its economic house in order, the U.S. won't continue to be a dominant military power around the world in 20 years. So as we take this day to recognize the 5th anniversary of the beginning of the Iraq War, and the fact that John McCain has said over and over again that he wants to continue the policies of George Bush, we need to really think again about how fit John McCain is to be commander-in-chief. So I would say it's not so much whether McCain is right or wrong about Iraq that's the issue, it's his myopia about Iraq as the singular issue that faces this country now and for decades into the future. That's what makes John McCain such a potential danger as a president of the United States. I'm Josh Marshall from TPM Media, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.